Hi, welcome to the training webinar. I'm Dale Franks. Today we are going to talk about one of the most basic and yet complex and also occasionally troublesome aspects of setting up an application in Process Director. And that is the way that we go about assigning users. On a day-to-day basis, it's pretty simple. However, there are some little wrinkles to assigning users that you need to keep in mind whenever you're creating your process timelines. So let's talk about it. The first thing we need to discuss are user types. Most of the time, we are used to dealing with authenticated users. That is to say, a user, somebody that I can pick specifically who has a Process Director account. And having a Process Director account, they can be a member of a group. And so I can assign a group of users as well as an individual user. I can assign users via business rule. And of course, there's always the default option, the timeline initiator, who is almost always an authenticated user. Authenticated users exist in the system. I can go to settings and I can go to user admin and I can see all of the users who exist on my system. And so all of these authenticated users, I can assign stuff to, and they have an identity inside of Process Director. But there is a second class of users that we have to discuss. And while we will today mostly be talking about authenticated users, we do have to discuss unauthenticated users and how they can participate in Process Director. And we'll go ahead and clear that out first. And we'll cover that before we get back into our authenticated users. When we talk about unauthenticated users, people who don't have a user account in Process Director, they fall into two main groups. There is the anonymous user, which is to say somebody whom we have no clue who they are, and we have no way of identifying them. And then we have email users. Now, email users are not anonymous in the sense that we can't identify them at all, because we do have an email address for them that we can use in the system. We can assign tasks to them, but they will never log into Process Director and they have to be treated specially. So let's talk about anonymous users first. Normally, when we're talking about anonymous users, we're generally talking about people from outside of our organization. They're not in our Process Director system. They're not part of our Windows system. They're generally outside the system completely. Most often, this would be customers. Or if you're in higher ed, as some of you are, that would be students. Because it's not uncommon for higher ed institutions to have their faculty inside Process Director, but to have their students all exist outside Process Director because they don't want to have to manage, 40,000 accounts. That is not to say that all higher ed institutions do it that way. There are some higher ed customers who include all of their students as Process Director users. They import them from their student database and make users out of them. So it can be either way. But for the most part, people outside your organization are treated as anonymous users or email users if we're going to assign them a task. It is quite common to want these anonymous users, Sorry, I may have to cough here and there because I'm still getting over the nasty bug that took me down last week. I don't know whether it was a cold or a flu, something like that, but all in my throat and upper chest and my nasal passages. So some sort of nasal infection. It was pretty bad, and I'm still kind of coughing from it. So you'll have to excuse me if I have to pull my fader down so that I can cough instead of coughing in your face. Um, Anonymous users generally are the users who submit forms. So we have a customer in Canada that does health insurance for pets. And so whenever somebody who has one of their pet health insurance policies needs to submit a claim, they submit that claim through Process Director. And of course, we can't include all of our customers all over the world as Process Director users, so we have to be able to allow them to access the form anonymously and to submit it as an anonymous user. And that is fairly simple to do. If we open up this form, for example, and we go to the Permissions tab for this form, this form is set up for anonymous users. Now, they can't view or modify or delete the form definition, but they can run it, which means that they can open a new instance of the form and they can submit it. Now, I've also got view children and modify children set up. Modify children so that if I assign them a task, they can go ahead and complete that task and they can fill out the form. Or if they need to, open up their claim and make some changes to it, they can do that as well. So we do need modify children in this particular use case. And then there's the view children. Obviously, they need to be able to view the form. Also, the reason why we have view children is if I'm going to show an anonymous user a knowledge view, say of all of the forms that they've submitted, well, they're going to need to have view children permission to view that knowledge view. Now, modify children is kind of special in this case. I've set this to yes, and this assumes that they have access to the form instance to just be able to open it, make any changes they need to make to it at any time, and then close the form. Normally, I would not need to give modify children permission if that scenario isn't true. If they are only going to open the form and make changes to it in the context of whatever task they might have been assigned, then I don't really need to give them modify children permission in general. When you're assigned a task, Process Director gives you temporarily all the permissions that you need as a process participant to make changes to the form, to do whatever is needed to complete your task, and then resubmit your form or complete the activity that's been assigned to you. And so normally you would not have to give modify children if all the anonymous user is going to do is be assigned a task and complete the form in the context of that task. If that's the case, they'll receive all the permissions that they need as a task assignee. So I'm giving modify children in this instance so that they can edit the form without having to be in the context of a task. So it gives them a little bit more freedom to access the form instance that they've submitted so that they can go in and make whatever changes they feel are necessary to it just on the fly. So modify children, we can kind of forget. If we are not going to show them a list of forms in, say, a knowledge view, and so they don't have anonymous access to any knowledge view, and we only want them to open this form in the context of a task, technically we don't need to give them view children permission either. View children and modify children for anonymous users are nearly always optional. They depend on how much freedom you're going to give the anonymous user to access those portions of your Process Director installation. They can't see anything else. other than what you give them view permission to. And of course, they can't make any changes unless you give them modify permission. So in general, for anonymous users, you can often live with just run permission just to allow them to open a new instance of the form and submit it. Run permission is basically submit permission for the form. So with that in mind, if I want an anonymous user to be able to open and submit a form, I generally only have to give them run permission. And if I want them to be able to do the extra things that we've just talked about, I can give them view or modify. But as long as they've got run permission, they can go ahead and submit the form. And they can also participate because of the way user assignment works. In general, if I want to be able to have a unauthenticated user participate in my process, then I really only have one choice for enabling them to do so. And that is that I have to be able to collect their email address, which I've done here with this field here. It's called input one. I should probably have given it a something other than the default form field name. But what I'm going to do with this form field is I am going to collect their email address. And only if I have an email address can I assign tasks to them. So it is not uncommon when you have a form that is open to anonymous users that you collect at minimum two things: their name, so that you can talk to them like a person, and their email address, so that you can contact them and assign tasks to them if a task comes up that they need to be assigned. It appears that there is a question, so let me address that. How can anonymous users modify a form instance outside of a task assignment? My understanding is that the anonymous users only interact with the system through task assignments. That is usually true. It is usually true that anonymous users can only look at task assignments. However, as we just went over, assuming that I can give the anonymous user a link to their form instance, I can give them view children permission on the definition, which in the form instance becomes view permission when the form instance is created. And if they have a link to that form instance, they can open it up. As I said, normally you wouldn't do that. Normally you would live with just run permission on a form. And in the normal course of events, you would only have that user access the form whenever you assigned them a task. It is possible, however, to allow an anonymous user to open the form instance. Now, obviously, you would have to give them the appropriate link so that they could click on that link and open the form instance. And if you had given them permission to edit it, they would still be able to do so. I mean, permissions are universal. So I think it's fair to say is that under normal circumstances, anonymous users only interact with the form through task assignment. And I think in probably 99-ish% of use cases, that is probably how you would want them, and the only way that you would want them to interact with the form. But the permission system in Process Director would enable you to allow them to see the form as long as you could pass them the appropriate link to that form. So it is possible. You just generally don't do it. There is a pretty small number of use cases where you would want users to be able to interact with the form outside the context of a task. But those edge use cases do exist, and Process Director enables those edge use cases through the application of permissions. So you can do it, but I think it would be fair to say that you would do it very rarely and only in very specific use cases. So I hope that answered your question. Now, I don't exactly remember what we were talking about before I asked your question, but we do need their email. So that's why this field is on the form. Now, with this field on the form, I need to go into the activity and I need to set it up properly. So on the Participants tab, my assignment of a task to an anonymous user is going to be an assignment from form field. Remember, I have no way of identifying this user. They're anonymous. They have no identity in the system. So the only option that I have to be able to assign a task to them is by collecting their email address in a form field and then making that task assignment via a form field. Normally, when you assign a task via a form field, what Process Director is expecting to receive is a user picker, because that's generally how we do it. Assigning tasks to anonymous users is fairly rare. But we are not doing that in this case, and we have no identity object from which we can pull attributes like their email or their name or what have you. All we have is the email address. So when we pull this from form field and we're only going to supply an email address, we also have to go over here to advanced options. And we have to specifically check this checkbox right here, which is labeled Allow Anonymous Users to be assigned tasks by email address. If this is not checked, then the task assignment will not work for an anonymous user. You have to explicitly tell Process Director that this is an anonymous user who is being assigned that task, and the task assignment comes from the email address. The reason that you have to do that is because the anonymous user is going to need a special link to place them in task context to go back and look at that form to complete their task. Unlike an authenticated user who can only access the system when they're logged in, and I have access to their entire identity and all of the other stuff, and I can easily track what it is they do on the system. That's not true for anonymous users. So anonymous users need to receive a special task context variable inside the email URL that is included in your email template. And so they receive a special URL that is different than an authenticated user would receive. It's got some extra special sauce in the URL to notify them when they click on that URL and the form opens. There are some URL parameters there that tell Process Director it is an anonymous user. This user has been assigned this task, and we want that user to complete the task. So you have to check this checkbox. If you do not, they will not receive all the special sauce they need to access the form, and they will not be able to participate in the task. So you've got to really do two things in the timeline activity if you want an anonymous user to participate. You have to be sure that you have their email address. And usually the only way that you have that is by collecting it via a form field. So you're going to have to make that task assignment to the email address. And then you're going to have to go to the advanced options tab of the activity, and you're going to have to specifically check this checkbox to enable them to perform their task assignment in the system. And if you do those two things, this anonymous user, which I guess is not anonymous now, that user's now been promoted to unauthenticated because they're not anonymous. We do have an email address. We can get in touch with them. And so that email user now has the ability to access the system. So those are the special little wrinkles that you have to keep in mind when you're assigning anonymous users. And it only applies to anonymous users and their access to the system. Outside of that, everything else that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about just normal authenticated users, the ones that we usually deal with on a day-to-day basis. For all users, whenever we assign them a task, there are two different types of task assignments that occur. There is the initial assignment of the task, and then there is assignment on restart. And we have some different options for handling how we want restarts to work, vice how we would like initial task assignments to work. It's important to remember that task assignment occurs once and only once in the lifetime of a particular iteration of a timeline activity. When the activity starts and the task is invoked, and that's the other thing we need to clear up, because I may use both of these terms, task and activity, in conjunction with each other or as if they were the same thing. A task and a user activity are not the same thing. User activities create user tasks when the user activity starts. User tasks only exist in the context of a user activity type in a process timeline. The task and the activity are technically two separate things. There is a process task object, which is what assigns a task to a user. And then there is the user activity type, which has all of the other properties of the activity, some of which are copied over to the task when the task is assigned to the user. While this is technically two different objects in Process Director and are in fact stored in two different tables, there is a process task user table in Process Director. There is a project activity user table in Process Director, both of which track some of the same things, but also some slightly different things. And it gets confusing unless we just think of the user activity and the task as kind of the same thing. So I may talk about task assignment, or I may talk about, a user activity, but whether I say task or activity, we're talking kind of the same thing. It's hard from the outside, just looking at it as an implementer. It's kind of hard to make that discrimination between a user activity and a task, because they are largely, although not entirely, synonymous objects. So I'm going to say task and I'm going to say activity at various times, and I'm going to more or less use those two terms interchangeably, because we're going to treat them as if they were the same thing, even though they are technically two different things. So when the activity begins or when the task begins, either or, same difference, that is when task assignment occurs. And we often get tech support questions about, hey, I went in and I changed this activity and I assigned a new user to it, and the old user is still assigned. Well, yes, that is what we would expect. And we would expect that because in the general order of things, task assignment happens once when the task is invoked. And then it never happens again unless the task is restarted. When the task is restarted, again, another task assignment function runs and the task is assigned to whoever it's supposed to be when the task starts. But in general, once a task starts and the task assignment has been done, it's done. Process Director is not going to go back 5 days later and check to say, hey, are these really the right people to assign to the task? The assumption is going to be made that whatever the task assignment was, whenever the task began, that is the correct assignment for this task. Restarts are a little different. We'll talk about restarts later on in this session. So you have to keep in mind that if you go back in after a task has started and you say, okay, I don't want, Bob to do this anymore. I want Sue to do this task, and you make a change in the process timeline, well, that's fine. Every time a new task starts for that activity, then it'll be Sue that gets assigned the task and things will work normally. But for all those tasks that have already been assigned to Bob, well, Bob needs to get them done because those tasks were assigned to him when the activity began, and he is the task assignee, so he still needs to complete those tasks. So you need to remember that that task assignment happens once, and it happens immediately when the task is invoked, and then it never happens again unless the task is restarted. So just keep in mind that the initial assignee is the official assignee and will remain so unless you go in and change it, which means you would actually have to go in and change each of those task assignments. That's going to be a manual process. And if, Bob has 50 tasks assigned to him, then you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to replace Bob with Sue in those 50 existing tasks, because the way that user assignment is evaluated is the same way as how the start when or needed when conditions are evaluated. When that activity kicks off, we're going to check a couple of things, and then we're never going to check them again for the life cycle of that activity, at least unless it restarts. So the activity is invoked. We're going to check our needed when conditions, which are checked once at the beginning of every activity. Do I actually need to run this activity, or can I skip it and move on with the timeline? The start when, all right, is this activity eligible to run? Have all of its dependencies been satisfied? Now, the start when is evaluated continuously. Every activity is constantly asking the system, can I run now? Is it okay? Can I start? And the system is constantly saying, no, you can't start. Your predecessor activities are not complete, so you're going to have to hold your horses until they're all done before I let you start. Once all of the dependencies are satisfied, now the activity can start. I know it's needed, so we have to run the activity. We can't skip it. I know that all of its dependencies are satisfied, so I can now start running. Once I start running, okay, who do I need to talk to about completing me? And that is the task assignee, and that is when it gets assigned. And so once those three actions have happened at the beginning of every activity, they're done. And now we are in the context of the task itself, and the task is going to have to be completed either by the user, or if you have it set up with conditions, it might get done programmatically. But in either event, until that task is completed, all of the assignments have been done. So you have to think about that and remember that if I really need to change somebody who is running inactive tasks, that's largely going to be a manual process for me as the process administrator to make changes in all of those running activities. Unless there is one global option that you have if you want to replace one user with another universally. You always do have the ability, let's say somebody, leaves the company and they have 100 tasks that are outstanding. Well, we know that they're not going to complete those tasks, so I'm going to have to replace them. So I do have the ability inside my user assignment to open up somebody's user account. So let's say Diana had left the company. She's no longer going to be with us. Okay, then fine. I can go to this property right here, replace this user with, and I can select another user and then click replace user now, and Process Director will globally go in and anywhere where this user has any sort of task assignment or is included in a business rule or whatever it may be, I am going to universally replace this user with whatever user I have searched for to replace them with. And that will do a global replace. So in a case like that, where I can do a global replace, I'm not going to have to go into every individual activity instance and make a task reassignment. I won't have to do that manually. I can just do it globally here. And the global replacement is often a lifesaver. But if you can't avail yourself of it, then you will have to go back and perform the manual administrative process of changing users. So let's go and take a look at who we can assign stuff to. So let's go back here to our participants tab. We can assign tasks to individual users. And when I say individual users, I can actually assign it to multiple users. I can, in fact, pick Barb and Diana and Carl. So I can assign multiple users in this way, or I can, so I can assign one or more users directly to a task. I'm begging you with tears in my eyes not to do task assignments this way. Not because I particularly care, but because you are really going to care later on, especially if you're in a large organization, when people start moving around inside or outside of the organization. Questions have arisen. What are the downsides to the global replace user option? Would the global replace user option overwrite the history in a previous task assignment? Okay, so two separate questions. What are the downsides to use the global replace user option? I'm not sure I can answer your question because I don't know what you would consider a downside. What I will tell you is that, and this will probably answer your second question too. What I will tell you is that the way the global user replacement works is that it's going to go into every definition, like timeline definitions, and it is going to look for any activity where the timeline definition specifies that user A is supposed to do this task, and it will replace them with user B. So that's every existing timeline definition. Then it is going to go into every running activity instance where they are assigned a task. And if they're assigned a task in that running activity, it's going to replace them there as well. So that's going to accomplish two things. It's going to replace the user in all future task assignments by doing a global replace in all of the process timeline definitions. And then it is going to replace them in all of the currently running activities where they are currently assigned a task, and it's going to replace them with the user whom you've selected to replace them with. Those are the only things that are going to change. We are not going to go back into history and change whether that user completed a task back in the day. That actually occurred. That's a thing that happened, and we cannot and will not erase that. We will not erase that because it has massive implications for compliance with, 25 CFR, the E-Sign Act. In the American legal context, going back and replacing the history like that, especially if you're in a regulated industry like finance or life sciences, or I guess in the case of education, there are even FERPA implications. We're not going to go back and change what actually happened. So we will. So all of the global user replacement is going to do is replace them Everything that's going on from today forward gets a global replacement. Everything from yesterday and backwards remains completely unchanged because we have to maintain that history for compliance purposes. That, by the way, is why you don't ever delete a user from Process Director. You disable the user. Once they're disabled, they no longer count against your license, so you don't have to worry about them. But you can't delete them because deleting a user would delete all of their history because the database is relational. I can't have a reference to a user in a timeline activity if that user doesn't exist in Process Director. That link has to be maintained. So we disable users, we never delete users. Disabling users doesn't count, like I said, against your license. So that user, for all practical intents and purposes, is done, doesn't get counted. But they remain in the system so that we can trace all of their historical activity. Uh, and that's super important if the FDA or the SEC decides to come poking their nose around. If they have compliance questions, it's going to be an extraordinarily bad thing if the FDA or the SEC is looking for somebody who did a thing and the person who you now say did the thing is not the actual person who did the thing. So that's why the global replace does not replace things in the past. And it's also why if the person who did the thing has just been erased and there's no record then of who did the thing, they're also going to be, you know, fairly miffed that you are out of compliance and that they can't trace the history of what happened. And in many cases, especially if you're in a highly regulated industry, you need to keep all of that historical data, even down to individual changes that were made in form fields on specific forms. So we don't go back and make those past changes. That's how it works. So I believe that answers your question. So let's go back to this troublesome user assignment thing. Don't assign via user. That is the BP Logic's official recommendation. It's going to be more trouble than it's worth in the long term, especially if you're in a large organization. Large organizations tend to have higher turnover, and most of the users for Process Director are fairly large organizations. And trying to manage things at the user level is tough because people do move around. And you're constantly going to have to be going back in and making changes to these activities. If you only have one process running, I guess it's not a big deal. I guess you can do what you want because there's only one place where you're going to go to make any changes. If you have 50 processes running, then it becomes a little bit of a pain when somebody leaves to have to go through 50 different processes and figure out whether that person is a participant in any of the activities in those processes. Yeah, there is the user references deal where you can look and see if, what all references that user, and then I guess you could open them up one by one. It's just a huge pain. So we generally, while you can, we generally don't recommend that you assign by users. Excuse me, my glasses are looking a little spotted here, so I'm going to go ahead and clean them a bit. So what are our alternatives then if we don't want to assign by users, because that would seem to be the most logical way to do it? And yes, it is temptingly logical, but it's going to cost you a lot more effort in system administration, especially if you're utilizing Process Director to do many different things. So our recommendation is that you do one of two things. If possible, assign by groups. Now, assigning by groups is neat because nothing says I have to have, two or more people in a group. I can have a group with a single person, and I can make assignments by group. And my group can have, as many people or as few people as I need in them. Now, the nice thing about assignment by group, when it's possible, because it's not always possible, so there is an important fallback or caveat to that. The nice thing about assigning by groups is they're all managed in IT admin. They're all part of user admin. So if I want to make a change, then all I have to do is go in and let's say I have a group that only has one user in it. Let's say the finance director or the HR director, whoever it may be, and they need to sign off on something and they change jobs, they leave the company, somebody replaces them. Okay, fine. All I have to do is go into the HR director group and make a change to that group's membership. Now, there is a custom variable, and I forget what it is on the top of my head, that will do something special for groups. Like I said, I forget what the group variable is, and it came up in a tech support ticket recently where someone was asking about it, and I cannot for the life of me remember. So I'm sorry about that. You're going to have to search the documentation, but there's actually a custom variable where if you update a group's membership, it will actually go back, look through all the activities that are running that are being assigned to those groups, and will update the task assignment for that group. I know I just made a big deal about how once task assignment runs, it is fixed in stone, and that will be the task assignment for as long as the sun burns hot in space. But that was a lie, because if you assign by groups, there is actually a custom variable that if you change the group's membership in midstream, so like you add a new member to a group, they'll be added to the task assignment. So groups have a little special dispensation like that, but you have to configure that on your system. It requires a custom variable to do that. So groups is our primary recommendation. However, there is a problem with that recommendation, which is that to be able to make changes to a group, I have to be a system administrator. And therefore, only a system administrator can go in and make that change to a group, which means the process manager can't directly make those changes. That may not be the way you want to manage it. So our fallback position is that we assign by business rule. So if I have a business rule, which I do, I'm pretty sure on my system, let me go here and go into business rules. And let's look in there. I have VP of operations. So let's go back over here. Let's look at my VP of operations business rule. It returns a user. It always returns a user. It's always going to be Barb Stanley. So if I want to allow the process manager to do an assignment, like in this case, VP of operations, and VP of operations may be assigned tasks in 100 different processes. I certainly do not want to go into those hundreds of processes and make changes to the VP of operations. Normally, I would have a group that said VP of operations. But here's the thing. I'm the system administrator, and I'm the only person who can make changes to group memberships. Nobody else can. I may not want to do that level of user and group management because it is tedious. I may need to make these changes on the fly. VP of operations is probably not a great example because we are going to presume that the VP of operations is going to stick around for a while. And so as a group, it's not that big of a deal to go in and change every couple of years the VP of operations. But let's say it's not VP of operations. Let's say it could be one of, the file clerks, and there could be many file clerks. And I do not want to have to be constantly going in on a daily or at least semi-weekly basis and have to go in and change that group all of the time. That then becomes a pain. It may be easier to allow the process manager to just have a business rule because business rules live in the content list. And if I have a business rule that needs to change a lot, then I might not want to manage that. I might want the process administrator to manage that. So they can just go into the content list and go into their business rule where all of their task assignments are, and then make whatever changes. There's also and I don't, this is one, there we go. That's the one I'm looking for, conditional assignment. Sometimes you have some real complex assignment where, a different user might be assigned based on some, in this case, some feature in the form. I have a form field for the state in the form. And I am going to want to pass that as a parameter. And this says state instead of state. So that should actually be the parameter. So I'm going to want to pass this form field value, which is the state. So California, New Mexico, Arizona, whatever. I'm going to need to pass that to the business rule. And, there might be a different person who gets assigned a task from every state. And so I might have a list of 50 possible participants. Now, there's no way that I could do this in a group assignment because, I could throw all 50 users in a group, but I only want to assign to me, for example, if the state equals California, and there'll be somebody else if it's Texas, and somebody else if it's North Dakota, and somebody else if it's Wyoming, and so forth. So that would require a business rule. I just simply couldn't do that by group assignment. And really, I wouldn't want to do this via the participants tab, although I technically could. That would be a very ugly participants tab to create. So in that case, I am going to change the task assignment based on some condition, in this case, a form field that I'm going to pass as a parameter. Well, this is a perfect use of a business rule for task assignment. I don't actually know who the task assignee is going to be, or at least I can't know unless I have access to the form and I can look and see, the customer's state. And if it's California, I know it's going to be me. Other than that, it could be one of 50 other users. So for conditional assignment, business rules are really great. And just like a group membership with a business rule, if I'm referring to this business rule ideally in multiple places, then great. I only have to change the business rule to change all future activities that are based on it for task assignment. So I only have to make one change in one place. And that is something that both the business rule type of task assignment and the group type of task assignment have in common. It does seem a little tedious to try to do everything in groups. There are certain groups that you could create that would have a single person in it. So like for your whatever C-suite users that you have, okay, you can assign those to groups. There are certain people who are going to change so rarely that you can assign them via groups. Or there are groups that are kind of permanent, even though their membership is going to shift from time to time. Group assignment works best for those. If it is more dynamic than that, maybe business rule is a better choice than group. And of course, if we're assigning it conditionally, business rule is our only choice for how we are going to assign those tasks. So Our recommendation at BP Logics is to assign by group if possible and to fall back to business rule as if desired. I probably should have said if necessary rather than if desired. But those are our two primary methods that we recommend that you do assignment, largely to make your life as a system administrator just easier to handle. That's anonymous. That's not what I was looking for. What am I looking for? That's what I'm looking for. Webinar timeline. We also have the ability to assign from form field. So generally we do that as a user picker. And the user picker, well, if I picked Barb or Dale off the user picker, it would assign the task to me. Normally, we're going to do this whenever we have a process where we don't actually know who the supervisor is. We have a way of knowing, but whether you've implemented that or not, well, we'll discuss in a second when we talk about system variable. But generally, it's one of those cases where, like I want to put in leave, and everybody in the organization has to fill out a leave form. I don't necessarily know who your supervisor is. I mean, I suppose I should, and I certainly could in Process Director, but I probably don't. And if I don't know who your supervisor is, or who your supervisor's supervisor is, or whatever the approval loop is, I'm going to need to allow you to pick the approvers on the fly, which means I'm going to need to let you go into a form field so that when you say, okay, I want to take a couple of days off, my supervisor is Eric, and I'm going to pick them as my supervisor in the user picker, and then I'm going to submit my leave request. And so for my first level of approval, I'm just going to choose from form field as my method of task assignment, and Eric will then get assigned the initial approval task. Now, system variable allows me to do something a little bit different from that. For example, in user administration, let's go back there. In user administration, at the very bottom of my user profile, I've got this additional properties section that contains a lot of stuff. And one of the things it contains is Diana's supervisor. Her manager is Barb Stanley. So I actually know who her boss is. So assuming that I have all of my managers set up properly, then I don't necessarily have to allow people to pick from a form field who their supervisor is. I already know it. And since I do, I can assign via system variable. So in that particular case, let's say I'm the timeline initiator. Well, the timeline initiator is a user system variable. So I can assign a task to whoever the manager is of the timeline initiator, as long as I have that stored in the user profile, which often comes out of your LDAP directory or Active Directory, whichever you're using, or Okta if it's SAML. If I have that information stored there, I can just pull that in every time that I create a user. That's going to make my life a little easier, because now if I assign via, well, you know what? Let's open up Visual Studio Code so that you can actually see what I'm typing here, because, even I have trouble seeing what I'm typing here. There's my ASCX file. Let's make a new blank text file. So what I could do, okay, I know who the timeline initiator is. That's me, but I want my supervisor. So show manager equals 1. Now, by default, this is going to return my name as timeline initiator. Show manager equals 1 is going to return my manager's name. But I need to do task assignment by the user's ID. So I do need to add one more thing here. Format equals UID so that I can return the GUID that uniquely identifies the person. So timeline initiator, show manager equals 1, format equals UID, is going to return the UID for my manager if I am the timeline initiator. And this is probably the most common way of using a system variable for a process timeline assignment. It's not the only way. As long as I can use any system variable that returns a user, and I can do the same thing. If I wanted to, I don't have to do this because I have timeline initiator as a drop-down selection, but I mean, technically, I could just assign the task to myself as the timeline initiator. The thing that's important to remember, whenever we're going to start using user system variables, and it could be timeline initiator. Ooh, this would be an awful one. Cur user. I have no earthly idea who current user would be in this context. So that might be an interesting way to make things go horribly wrong as an experiment. But any custom variable or system variable that returns a user, just got to remember, we're going to want to give you their name as a default because we're trying to make all this friendly. So if you just evaluate a user system variable of any type, the default thing it's going to return is their name. For task assignment, that is a bad thing. I need their ID to assign a task. So therefore, I always need to have the UID as the formatter anytime that I try to assign a task via system variable, because it's going to be a user system variable of some type, and there are many different types of user system variables. And whatever they are, if I'm going to use them for task assignment, has to be format equals UID. By the way, that could be true if I was using a form field, right? Let's say I had a user picker on the form, and I said, I want to assign it by form. I wanted to assign it via user picker. And sometimes you might do this with a form. I still have to have that format equals UID. I think in the past, see, some things in Process Director change over time. And I think in the past, the default that got returned with a user system variable was the UID, and everybody complained about it because nobody ever wanted the UID. Everybody always wanted the name, and then they always had to put in format equals name so that they could get the name back instead of the UID. And it was so hard to type all of that when all I wanted was the name. So, fine. Now the name is what that's going to return, because it basically returns a user. So it's a user system variable. So it's going to be the name. And so on your form, if you use the system variable and it's going to show you their name, that's going to be great. But if you're going to use it for task assignment, you are going to need to be sure that you set format equals UID, because we changed it because people kept asking us to change it. And, you know, this is one of those things. There are several things like this in Process Director where someone is going to hate the decision that we've made to do things in a certain way. It's just the way that we have changed over time. I think we've done it twice. what happens to your running process timeline activities if you go into the timeline definition and like delete that activity or make some other change, whatever it may be. How does that affect your in-flight timeline activities? And we've got a couple of options. One is do nothing. It has no effect at all. And then half of the customer base says, I hate that because I want to know when I make that change that it is going to change my existing timeline activities. And I'm going to want to go in, and if it can't change it programmatically, I need them in an error state so I can go and manually make those changes. Okay, that's what you want. That's what we'll do. And then immediately we get the other half of the customer base that says, no, 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 don't do it that way. I don't want to affect my running instances. I want them to work exactly the way they're supposed to work. Okay, we'll do that if that's what you really want. So the system variable thing is one of those things that whatever that system variable returns, somebody's not going to like it. So we've just had to live with the knowledge that there are certain demands that are not, it's not possible to provide 100% satisfaction for them. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Timeline initiator. Well, I haven't covered it, but we've talked about it. That's whoever initiated the timeline. They just get assigned the task. That is the default selection. Every time you create a user activity, of course, it always just defaults to the timeline initiator, largely because we don't really know how you want to assign a task. So it's entirely up to you. So key takeaways: use users or business rules as a best practice for making task assignments. Now, there is another little wrinkle with task assignments, and that is with subtasks. Now, as you saw, this example is going to show it with users, but you would do the same thing with groups. There is this deal here called subtask name. I can assign tasks as subtasks. We rarely do it, but it can be done. And this can get a little complex and a little deep here. So let's go over here to this example of subtasks and subtask due dates. So here is a process timeline where I have this activity here. It's got 3 different users. Now, I've assigned by users, and most of the time I do assignment by user because this is a test system. So this is another one of those areas where I don't, actually follow the best practice because it just doesn't make a lot of sense in my case on a system that largely only I use. And all of my users are test users who will never change. So my life is a lot simpler than yours is when it comes to building implementations. But as you can see here, I have 3 different subtasks. Without wading into really deep water here, I can basically split up a user activity into 3, well, 1 or more separate tasks. The default is 1, but I have the ability to do subtasks. Now, subtasks are generally done in circumstances where I am going to assign users in a series, not in parallel. By default, if I assign multiple users to a task, they're going to perform that task in parallel, which is to say they're all going to receive the task assignment at the same time. They're all going to complete the task at the same time. The only difference will be the order in which they complete it is completely random, but I'm going to expect the task to end only when all 3 have completed the task. But you can assign tasks in series. So when I assign tasks in series, that means that Barb is going to do the thing first, then it's going to go to Diana, and then it's going to go to Rick. And the second and third users are not going to see a task assignment until the first and second users, respectively, have completed their tasks. Now, I can do a couple of things with these subtasks. Number one, I can name them. Naming them is important. However, the only way I can really name them is via a form field. So on my form, I have 3 form fields, subtask 1 name through subtask 3 name. And that is where I name the subtasks. Subtask names are generally not something you will do on the fly. You will normally do this via hidden form fields on the form where you have specifically set their default value. So the fields will never display to any end users. They will have the default values that you have determined are appropriate assigned when the form is started. And then I can have my 3 subtasks, and I can have 3 or more people, 2 or more, however many it is. I mean, if you only have 1 person who is performing a task, there's no subtask. You have 1 person, that's just the task. And in most cases, if I have 2 or more users, they're all going to do the task. But what the subtask allows me to do is to encapsulate approval loops into a single activity, right? So I'm going to go through Barb, Diana, and Rick and give each one of them the ability to approve or deny my request. And so rather than having a separate activity for every approver, I can throw all 3 approvers into the same activity, assign their task via subtask, and then have them perform their task in series so that it just goes from Barb through to Rick in the order that I want. When I have subtasks, that means that I also can have separate due dates. Normally, I have a single due date on a timeline activity because, well, normally I don't have subtasks. But if I do have subtasks, those might all be done on a different due date because I want to give each individual some appropriate amount of time to complete their task. So on the due date tab, whenever I'm doing subtasks and those subtasks are run in sequence, I'm going to need a business rule that is going to define what the due dates are for each of the subtasks. So I have such a business rule. It is called subtask due dates BR. And so once again, I have to do an evaluation of what the subtask name is. And so I have 3 possibilities: subtask 1, subtask 2, and subtask 3. And whatever that subtask name is, I am going to have some different submit dates. So different due dates. So my first due date just takes whatever date the form was submitted and adds 3 days to it. That becomes my due date for subtask 1. Subtask 2's due date is then 5 days after the form submit date. And for subtask 3, it'll be 8 days after the form submit date. So depending on what task is running, or rather what subtask is running, I'm going to have a different due date generated by my activity, or my task in this case, because whenever Rick has a task assigned, I'm going to want to have whatever the due date is for that subtask. I'm going to have to go and look at that subtask's business rule, and it will let me know that Rick needs to have this done because this is subtask 3. Rick is going to need to have this done 8 days after the form was initially submitted, and whatever date that happens to return, that will be the date that gets dynamically generated as the due date for that particular subtask. there are some drawbacks to subtasks. Let's not kid ourselves. Trying to encapsulate everything into a single activity, while possible, is going to require that you pay some special attention here in the results. Now, I haven't done any special configuration here, but I am going to have to, well, I actually have done some special stuff here. I just haven't done all the special stuff I need to do. Percent of participants that choose this result. Approve cannot be true unless I get 100% of participants. Now, I could also, since I have 3 participants, I could ignore this, and I could set my number of participants to 3. And that would require all 3 of my participants. Of course, if I do that and I add a different participant, then I have to come back here and change this. But if I just say 100 here, that requires 100% approval. So I cannot approve unless 100% approve. And I can then come down here, and in this case, I would use number, and I would just say, okay, all I need is 1. If I get 1 deny, then this activity ends with deny as the result. So I have to be careful to come in here and make this configuration there if this is going to be my whole approval loop, and I'm going to have all 3 of these people do an approval. That's fine. I can do that. But you got to remember, I have to be able to handle when these tasks are assigned. How does, or I have to handle this activity's end state when I have 3 different tasks that are assigned to it. Because if any one person denies it, this whole activity has to be denied. I'm not a huge fan of this, other than the fact that there are circumstances, especially with larger timelines, where you can compress a couple of different timeline activities into a single activity. I don't know that I would recommend it per se, although there are some times when it does make sense. So if I have some reviewers who I want to see this, and I don't want reviewers 2 or 3 to see it, if reviewer 1 says, if reviewer 1 says, I want this changed, and I'm not going to approve it until some change is made. Okay, then that's great. Diana and Rick never actually have to see it. So there are some times when subtasks make sense. We don't use them very often. What we tend to do is to separate Barb, Diana, and Rick into 3 separate timeline activities that are dependent on each other. And that is certainly one simple way of doing it. And it doesn't require as much thinky pain for figuring out how to do this sort of configuration. But this sort of configuration is available to you, so you can use subtasks. And you can track what subtasks were approved and what subtasks were denied, because each of the subtasks is now identified with its own name that you can see on the routing slip and so forth. So this is another task assignment method that's available to you. Now, as I said at the beginning, I am using users here, but you could, again, use groups or business rules in the same way to accomplish the same sort of thing. So there's nothing else that you need to do. I mean, it's not that hard to do. You just have to have a couple of extra pieces to make it happen. I think we probably could improve this feature some, but even though it's available, there doesn't seem to be a lot of demand for it. Like I said, most people just tend to make these 3 separate activities rather than using subtasks, and that's fine. But on really long timelines where you can save if you can compress three activities into a single activity, sometimes there are some advantages to doing that. And that is an option that is available to you. Once we have picked how we want to do an assignment, whether it's going to be timeline initiator or group or business value, we then need to go into the advanced options tab and see if we have to make any changes. Oh, actually, there is one other tab I want to talk about. I see this on a not entirely irregular basis. And I don't know why, and I don't know where people get the idea, and I don't know where different people have gotten the idea, apparently independently. But I see a lot of this. I'm going to do this notification. And let's say that task is assigned to Barb. Okay. All right. Well, I need to let Barb get a task assignment. So let's see. Let me uncheck that because boy, I don't want that to happen. That seems bad. I just want Barb, who is the task assignee here, when this activity starts, I just want to tell Barb that she has an activity. There we go. Now I am good. Now when this activity starts, Barb is gonna get her notification. Barb will get a notification. And if she tries to open up the activity from that notification or open the form to complete her task, she will see two buttons at the bottom of the form, OK, and close without saving. What she will not see is approve, deny, resubmit, or any other action button because she will not receive a notification with a URL that allows her to access the form in task context. You already have all of the participant notifications you need right there. That's all you need. This notification section here is not for your task assignees. They get a notification via this checkbox, and they will receive an email URL that opens up the form in task context that will enable them to complete their task. So do not uncheck this. I mean, unless you literally do not want your task assignees to receive an email notification that opens up the form in task context. Unless you specifically don't want that, don't uncheck this box. In the context of a user task, this add notification button is for you to add email notifications to people who are not task assignees for this user activity. You're giving them a courtesy notification. Hey, this activity started. We thought you might like to know. That's what this notification is for on the bottom in terms of task assignment. Task assignees get the appropriate notification with that checkbox. Now, you will have noticed that many times I uncheck that box. That's because I'm in the middle of a webinar and I don't want the first thing I have to do when I get out of a webinar is to clear out 50 email notifications for task assignments from my email. So a lot of times I turn that off, but that's because I'm special and I do special things that you don't do. You don't want to turn this off. You want to keep that bad boy checked so that your automated notifications to task assignees go through in the format that they go through. There is no need for you to uncheck this and then manually rebuild the notifications for your assignees. It's not going to work the way that you want it to work if you do that, unless the way you want it to work is to ensure that your assignees cannot open the form in task context. That's all you're accomplishing. And look, if that's what you want to accomplish, great. That's how to do it. But I suspect that that is not, in fact, what you want to accomplish in 99.9% of use cases. All right, so now that we have assigned tasks, there are a couple of special considerations on the Advanced Options tab that we need to keep in mind. The first is re-authenticate users. Normally, if somebody's already logged into Process Director, we are not going to take the trouble to make them log in again. However, there are some scenarios where, for security reasons, you want to ensure that the user authenticates before completing their task, indeed, before even opening up the form to complete their task. So you can check this. While this may be needed for security reasons, it is going to mildly irk your user community, because if they are already logged into Process Director and they get this email and they click on it, they will inexplicably be forced to log in again, even though they're already logged in. So, they may or may not express their displeasure to you at making them re-authenticate. However, for security reasons, this is sometimes necessary. Allow task sharing. This is something that we talk about in system administration when it comes to delegation. Normally, we have the normal delegation where you are automatically assigned. So if I go on vacation and I delegate my tasks to you, then while I'm on vacation, you'll just automatically get all of my task assignments. And then when I get back or my delegation ends, then the task will come back to me. That's just normal delegation. But there is task sharing, which is what we call shared delegation, which is to say, and we're not going to go through all of the ways that we can set it up here because there's a whole special webinar where I cover that. But if I want to, and this is usually done for higher level executives, I can specify people who can share my tasks. So in shared delegation, I could say, okay, Barb and Diana are my administrative assistants, my office manager. There are some things that I want them to be able to do that I don't want to be bothered with. So even though the task is officially assigned to me, I want to give them the authority to complete that task on my behalf. And so I can, through shared delegation, identify Barb and Diana as my delegates for shared delegation. And there's a special knowledge view that you have to build up, the shared delegation knowledge view, so that Barb or Diana, they can open it up and they can see all of the tasks that I have shared with them, and they can open those tasks and complete them as if they were me. But the only way that it works is if I click on Allow Task Sharing. So task sharing has to be configured individually at the activity level, or none of the other stuff works. So I could still have my delegates, and they could still have their knowledge view that shows them all of the shared tasks. But unless I click that checkbox, this particular activity will not be shared with them, and I will have to do it. So anytime that we want to allow task sharing on an activity, we have to go to the advanced option and manually turn it on. Allow tasks to be completed from email. There's an entire webinar that I do on this, on how this works. I can actually just reply to an email, send it off, and never have to open up Process Director at all. It requires a lot of configuration. and a lot of user training so that they reply to the email correctly. But if I'm going to have that email allow task to be completed from email, then I need to be sure that that box is checked too. I've also got to enable email invitations. This is a rather dangerous one. And by the way, it has a security problem. It's a known security problem. It's one that we try to make you very well aware of. It is the same security problem, by the way, that exists with unauthenticated users who you are sending task assignments via email. In both of those circumstances, I'm going to allow the assignment of tasks by email, one from anonymous users who just have an email to identify them, as far as that goes. And the other is this enable email invitations, which will enable me to get a special invitation link in my task assignment email that I can forward to someone else and invite them to become part of the task. And then they can click on that link and they can perform that task. Similarly, for unauthenticated users where I have their email, I can send an email to them and they have a special task link that allows them to participate in the task. The problem with both of these things is going to be that Process Director does not know that the person who receives the email or a person, well, it doesn't know that once that email is sent, it does not know that you are not going to forward that same email to someone who should not access the system, because Process Director doesn't know you. Process Director does not know you as an unauthenticated user with just an email. So I can send that email to, Bob, and then Bob inadvertently forwards that email to his cousin. Well, his cousin now has access to the task because his cousin now has the special link that he can click on to access the task and do whatever he wants to in that task as if he was the task assignee, because I can't verify that the person who's opening the task is the person who I wanted to receive the email. Because once that email is sent to the intended recipient, it becomes the wild, wild west after that. Same thing with enable email invitations. My task assignee can forward that email again to his cousin and invite his cousin to participate. Okay, not a great idea, but I can't enforce that in Process Director once I start enabling email invitations. So that capability exists. Be super careful about using it. Require at least one user to be assigned and complete this task. This seems really innocuous, but don't check it unless you really, really mean there has to be one user who is assigned and who will complete this task. That means that whatever activity you've set up can't have any result conditions. It can't have any completed when conditions because it can't be completed. You're going to require a user to actually be assigned to the task, and that user must manually complete the task. And if they do not, that task cannot be ended. There are times when you want to do this for security reasons or whatever. But just remember, if you require it, we're really serious. You are requiring it. So be careful about what you check there. We've already talked about allow anonymous user. The other two are irrelevant. This one is a little bit different. Normally, when we assign tasks, by default, all users are assigned a task in parallel. And that's generally fine. I assign it to 3 users and I expect all 3 of them to finish it. But that's not always what happens. I might assign a task to a group of users. I only really need one of them to complete it, and I don't care which one of them it is, but one of them needs to look at the task and complete it. So I've got this checkbox right here, where if I check it, what is going to happen when that task is assigned to the group? They're all going to receive a task assignment notification that says, hey, you've been assigned a task. And there'll be a link to the form, and they can click on that link and they can open the form. And what they're going to see on that form is not an approve or deny button. They're going to see a button that says accept task. The first person who clicks that button now owns the task. So I could assign this activity to 10 different users in a group. They'll all get their notification when the task kicks off. One of them will eventually open up the task and will click the accept task button. And once they do so, all of the other 9 people in that group immediately become non-required. They all drop off, and the person who accepted the task now becomes the only task assignee for that task. They're the only person that needs to complete it. So this is a relatively common thing that is done where, I've got like a group of like HR clerks who, process leave requests and change of name requests and blah. And so I just assign the task to all 10 of them. Whoever has time will just pop it open, accept the task, and they'll be the one who does the processing. So I don't actually know who in that group is going to complete the task. I'm just going to assign it to the group and just let one of them claim it, and then they'll do whatever processing they need to do once they've done so. All in parallel, as I just said, is the default option. All in series, we've talked about as well in terms of subtasks. But again, I don't actually need to have subtasks. Subtasks are nice for organization. But if I just assign 5 users to this task, or I assign it to a group, then it's just going to go through the group user by user, probably alphabetically, I think, in most cases. And it's just going to send a notification to the first user, and it's going to wait until they're complete, and then they'll send it to the second user and so forth until all the users in the group have been assigned the task. So you can assign any task with multiple assignees in a series. It doesn't have to just use subtasks, although that's probably the most common way that you would do it. You have a couple of different options here, though. You've got a round robin. Now, in that case, I'm not going to assign the task to the first user to accept, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to 10 different users, and it's just going to circle through all 10 of those users one at a time. And each time a task is assigned, it's going to move to the next user and assign that specific user the task until it goes through all 10 users, and then it's going to go back and start back again at user 1. So it basically just does, as we say here, a round robin through the assignees that are assigned the task. So I can assign multiple people to the task, but on any given task instance, only one user is going to be assigned. And the system is just going to track who is the next assignee on this task. I also have the ability to take a look at who has either the fewest tasks in this particular process or who has the fewest tasks overall, and I can actually assign tasks via workload balancing. So I might assign a task to 2 people, and one of them has 10 tasks and the other one has 2 tasks. Well, obviously the person who has 2 tasks is less busy, so I'll just assign it to them. The only difference between these two is whether I want to assign to the person who has the fewest tasks in the specific process that I'm configuring at this moment, or if I want to take a look at their task list and just to see who is the least busy person in my list of assignees, and whoever has the fewest tasks, then that's who I will assign this specific task to. What are we going to do after a user completes the task? The default is to automatically show users next task if it is in the process. So you'll see quite often here on the webinar, because this is the default, I'll complete a task and the form doesn't go away. It just refreshes and I'm in the context of a new task. So I've moved from activity 1 to activity 2. That's the default behavior of Process Director. And that's generally, we think, how you would want it to run. So if I'm assigned 2 tasks in a row, the form is not usually going to fall to go away when I complete the task. It's just going to refresh the form, and it's going to refresh it in the context of the next task. There's another question. If there is a group of 10 users with the round robin, would it stop at person 4 if that person accepts and performs some action? Well, no, because that's not how round robin works. Round robin does not give you the opportunity to accept or reject a task. The decision as to who is going to get that task in a round robin will occur when the task is invoked. If user number 3 was the last person who completed this activity, the last time this, well, here's the thing. We're not talking about the same instance of the timeline. The way round robin works is I have instance 1 and user 1 is assigned the task for instance 1. When instance 2 gets created, I'm going to assign this task to user 2 and so forth. So for each timeline instance, a different user is going to be assigned the task. And so nobody's ever going to accept a task. You would never select assign task to first user to accept unless you are selecting all in parallel. That is the only scenario in which someone can accept a task. If you were to click assign user to task to first user to accept, and then set this to all in series, I have bad news for user 1. User 1 will always have to accept that task. It will never go away, and users 2 through 10 will never see that task. At least not until user 1 completes it. Oh, and when user 1 completes it, since he was the person who accepted it, users 2 through 10 will never see that task. It is done. This only works. This task acceptance only works when I am assigning it to all 10 users in parallel. The round robin system, you would never use this because it would just be, this only makes sense if I'm assigning in parallel. If I'm not assigning in parallel, then it doesn't matter whether this is clicked or not. Because if I set to all in series, once user 1 completes the task, user 2 through 10 never have to do it. If it is round robin, it's only being assigned to a single user each time this activity runs. So whether they accept it or not, they are the only user who is ever going to get assigned this task. So if they don't accept it, it will never get done. So this assign task and this ability to accept task, that only matters there. And there's no other circumstance in which, as you say, if there is a group of 10 users with the round robin system, would it stop at person 4 if that person accepts and performs some action? That is not how round robin works. It will never stop at a person. If person 3 did it the last in the previous timeline instance, then user 4 is going to do it in this timeline instance. And they're the only person who's going to be assigned that task. The round robin doesn't run through during a single process timeline instance, it is assigned for each successive timeline instance, and it assigns one and only one user, and that user does not have any opportunity to do anything other than complete the task assignment because they're the only one who has received that task assignment. So it is solely for them. So there's no option to accept a task. And the option to accept a task only matters if you're assigning all the tasks in parallel. Outside of that, it is either pointless or counterproductive to click that because it accomplishes literally nothing if I'm assigning in series or via round robin. Because all of my round robins are, I'm going to pick a person. That is, it's like a game of tag. The system decides you are it, and you are the assignee for this task. And only one person gets that duck, duck, goose tap on the back of the head, which means that they're the ones that have to do it. So round robin is basically the system going duck, 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 goose, and you're now the goose. You got to get up and run around the circle because you're it. Okay, so as I was saying, by default, automatically show the user's next task if it is in this process. I have, and that's generally the way we want it to work. It's generally the most convenient way of it working. However, we may want to go a little bit deeper. Usually, what we want to change, if we're going to change this at all, is to show the user's next task if it is in any step for any related sub-process. Because what we do is we complete a task and we drop from the main process to some sort of sub-process, and I might have to participate in that sub-process. And if I don't show the form for that sub-process, I just close the main process form, which is what would normally would happen. Until I either look at my email or go look at my task list, I don't know that I've been assigned that task in a sub-process. So generally, we want to go even looser in terms of what we want to show the user so that they can run to that next process. However, there are two schools of thought on this, because there is a school of thought that says, okay, our default is to automatically show the user's next task. If it's in this process, if it's for this step in a different process, so we'll show multiple processes, or if it's in any sub-process. There is a school of thought that says, don't do that. Do not show the next task. When I complete this task, I want my form to close, and I do not want the user to do the next task because it will confuse them if they click approve and the form just reloads and the next thing that they see is another approve at the bottom of the form. My users will not know that they have completed one task and are now in a subsequent task. Therefore, I want the form to close every time I complete a task. I do not want to show them their next task. I want them to go into their task list and physically look this up and see that they have moved from activity 2 to activity 3. And then I want them to open up activity 3 and they will complete activity 3. And then if there are other activities, they will manually open them until they are done. Because if I keep showing them the same form over and over, it just, quickly reloads when they click approve and they just start now spam clicking approve. They don't know what they're approving because they don't know that they have moved to a new process. Okay, you know what? That's not an invalid way to think. Our defaults error on let's just show the user the next thing. Your thought process might be, I don't think that I want to show my users the next thing. I think I want them to open the next thing manually so that they know what they're doing. If that is your school of thought, then fine. You can change that default to do not show the user's next task so that you isolate each task completion. Finally, we have to talk about restarting users. Now, We can restart in a couple of ways. There's, of course, the administrative restart, where you just go into a timeline instance and you find an activity and you say, restart this activity. However, there are restarts that happen programmatically. If you're in an approval loop and somebody hits, I want some more information. So they hit request resubmission and it runs back to the very top of the activity. Okay, well, this activity's iteration is now complete. And that activity will restart in the future. As I've restarted my approval loop, eventually it'll get back to this activity and it will restart. And I need to know what is going to happen whenever this task restarts. Now, by default, we start only the configured task participants. In most cases, this is not super important because most of the time your timeline activities complete in 2 or 3 days. I need to approve a leave request. Like, it's not rocket science. I don't need 4 months to figure out whether I'm going to let you go on leave or not. On the other hand, there are things that do take 4 months or 6 months, or we have a customer that has a timeline activity that takes 18 months. Once you have 18-month-long timeline activities, restarts put you in an entirely different mindset because a lot of stuff can happen in 18 months. So when I restart this task, who do I want assigned to it? By default, we're just going to say, okay, we're going to start only the configured task participants. Great. So at the start of every activity, it's going to look to see who's assigned or who is configured for task assignment. It's going to assign only to them. But what if my new user, we're 15 months into an 18-month task, and the person who was originally assigned the task has now moved to a different job. Now for all new activities, I assign it to a new person. And for whatever reason, this activity needs to restart. Okay, the person who originally was assigned this task and who presumably has all of the corporate knowledge about it that they have had for 15 months, now they would no longer be assigned to this task with the default. So I have these start configured and users all previously run in the task. So when it restarts, okay, there's a new guy who's supposed to do this task. But there was an old guy who was assigned it 15 months ago. So sure, let's assign it to the new guy, but let's also assign it to the old guy because he's the person who presumably has all of the long-term knowledge about how this activity has worked. I also have some other options. Start only users that previously completed the task. So let's say I have 10 users assigned. 5 of them completed it and then it got rejected. Okay, fine. When we restart, we're going to start only the users that previously completed. Or I can do the opposite. Forget the 5 that previously completed. Let's just go back to the last person who completed the task, the person who probably hit deny or request resubmission. Let's start with them. So if they were person number 5, we'll start with user 5 and we'll forget 1 through 4 because they thought everything was fine. We'll start with user 5 and we'll move from 5 through 10. And then start only users that did not complete previously. So if we went through 5 users and restarted, when we come back, we're going to restart at 6. So this requires a lot of thought about how you want task restarts to work. In most cases, certainly well above 80% of cases, start only configured task participants is fine. Most of your tasks are short-term tasks. Whoever happens to be configured at the moment the task starts, that's who should do the task. And that's generally how we think tasks should work and how task assignment should work. That's why it's the default. But once you start getting into longer and longer tasks, especially tasks that, require interaction with federal regulatory agencies, your tasks tend not to be 3 days. They tend to be 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. So once you start getting long-term tasks, you need to start thinking about what is going to happen if this task restarts 6 months from now? If the people have changed, how's this going to, how am I going to want this to work on those sort of task restarts? So this, while normally ignorable, once you start getting, month plus long tasks, this becomes a super important property to think about in terms of task restarts. By the way, in addition to administrative restarts and the restarts that occur naturally because you're in a loop, and a loop restarts, you can set conditions to force a restart yourself. So as part of the activity configuration, you can set up and evaluate any evaluable condition inside Process Director or via a business value from any data stored externally to Process Director. And you can come up with a condition that says, okay, when this is true, I need this task to restart. This condition will be evaluated every time the timers run to check to see if this activity needs to be restarted. And if it does, it will perform the restart. And so the restart all users when is very important in conjunction with the restart users property here to determine A, when do you want to restart? And B, when a restart occurs, how do you want task assignment to work? So while, well above 80% of the cases, this is totally ignorable, it becomes increasingly important whenever you start getting into long-term process timelines. So you need to just keep it in mind that it's there, and it will make your life a little easier if you configure that properly. Well, we are rapidly approaching noon, which means we are approaching the time when I stop talking, turn off the camera, and go back and do other less pleasant things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis. And I assume it's the same for you. So have a great week. Have a great weekend. Be careful tomorrow because according to my watch, tomorrow is Friday the 13th. So, other than that, assuming that Friday the 13th goes well for us all, I'll look forward to seeing you here again next week. Until then, so long.